Imagine the possibilities. Imagine the possibilities. Imagine the possibilities. Imagine the possibilities.
Introducing Macintosh. It does all the things you'd expect a personal computer to do. It does a lot of things you wouldn't expect a personal computer to do. And it does some things no other computer has ever done before.
There are literally tens of thousands of some of the brightest people in the world today trying to build these machines and understand them. And I'm going to tell you why. This quote is from a respectable scientist, in fact, one of the founders of this field, that may look a little strange to you who don't follow theoretical physics, but there is a very clear prediction that our most successful theory of nature makes, and that is that there are an enormous number, mind-bogglingly large number, of parallel realities, as real as this one, that have different consistent histories. But science has reached the point now where we can build machines that exploit those other worlds. And this analogy with flight, I think, is an interesting one. So a horse can beat, or could beat, the initial flight of the Wright brothers' flight in speed. But a plane is not a faster horse. A plane is a different kind of machine. The plane takes advantage of another resource that nature gives us, this third dimension, in order to do something that matters to people better that you could do with any horse. It doesn't matter how fast you make a horse, it will never fly. So you may think, well, this is all fine and dandy, but aren't these things in the realm of theory and speculation kind of in the same regime as other futuristic things you may have heard of which may be allowed by the laws of physics but aren't here yet? That's not true. There are in fact many of these machines deployed now in openly available research centers following the model that was used to introduce supercomputers to the world. They're too big and ornery and difficult to operate to put in your home. These machines that supposedly can do this wild stuff, let's forget about how they work, if you could build one, could solve problems that you could never, ever solve with any computer of the sort that we built. If you took every single atom of silicon in the world and made the most sophisticated conventional Intel-style processor that you could build, there are problems we know of that I could write down on a sheet of paper that you could never, ever, ever solve with that thing, that you could with this kind of machine. And that thing is like flight. It gives these computers access to these new resources, maybe you could call them parallel universes. Because what they're going to do is apply this machine to an area that I think is fundamentally important. It's a crux of our future as humans. And that's, can we build machines like us? Beautiful new computational idea in the service of trying to make intelligent machines. In quantum mechanics, there's this concept that a thing can exist in two states which are mutually exclusive at the same time, quote unquote. So I'm using those words because the English language was developed before we had concepts to describe what these things actually are doing. But I'm going to give you a roundabout way of understanding this. Imagine that there really are parallel universes out there, and now imagine you have two that are exactly identical in every respect, all the way out to the horizon as far as we can see, down to the last little atomic detail of every single thing, with only one difference. And that's the value of a little thing called a qubit on this chip. And if we're smart enough, we can dive into them and grab their resources and pull them back into ours to make an effect in our world. Now, this may sound very odd to you and bizarre, and in fact, I am using language that a normal theoretical physicist probably wouldn't use, but this is, what I'm telling you is absolutely correct and in line with the way that these things actually work. As an aside, I just wanted to say that, at least in the Valley, Silicon Valley, and maybe in the United States in general, there's a very deep feeling of unease about the way technology has been developing. Because we have all of these vast array of very smart people, and what they're doing is crap. They're building things that cannot last. They're building things that are not important. This is a little bit of a controversial point of view, but I believe it. All right, so now I'm getting into the last part of my talk where I'm going to make some predictions, some dangerous predictions. So here's my first prediction. I'm going to predict that by 5 years, NASA will have found an Earth-like planet with Earth-like atmosphere and water on it, and serious people will start discussing how we get there. My second prediction is that this business of parallel universes is going to turn out to be very important. This picture that I've got under here is what's called a gravitational lens. When Einstein proposed his general theory of relativity, it came with a bunch of experiments that you could use to test it. And one of them was that if there was a point of light very far away and a galaxy in the middle, that galaxy should bend the light and you should see a ring. And this was eventually observed. And I think what's going to happen is somebody is going to come up with an experiment to test this reality of these things. And we're going to be able to do so. My third prediction that I'm going to end on is the most important of all. I believe that humanity is on the cusp of the most important technological, societal revolution that's ever occurred. And that's when we got to the point where the machines that we build outpace us in every respect. I don't mean that they're better calculators. I don't mean that they're better at searching. I mean everything. 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 It feels like an altar to an alien god. They really are impressive machines.
So I'm going to talk about aliens. But before I do that, we had a little bit of interesting news today that's Kindred relevant, and I wanted to share it with you because I'm pretty proud of it. Kindred was named to a list of the MIT's smartest 50 companies. And this is a very prestigious list. It's very hard to make it. But the thing that was distressing about it is that they have this map that they show of where all these companies are from. And there wasn't a single company on the list that was from Canada. Not a single one, which was a little surprising, of course, because we're from Vancouver. But they thought that we were from San Francisco because we have an office there, but we're not. We're from here. 3 years ago, the previous company that I founded, D-Wave, also made the list. And it was also the only company from Canada that was on the list at that time. So I've been trying to build the tech community in Vancouver for 25 years. And I find it super depressing that it seems to be so hard to generate world-changing 0 to 1 companies around here. You know, I think that I'm gonna just pitch this idea. Some of you may have seen me talk about this before, but we have this problem here that we don't think big enough. We've got all of the ingredients to create this massive, massive thing in Vancouver, and the spark is not being lit. So I implore you, if you're entrepreneurs, people who are thinking about what you want to do, think bigger, because we don't think big enough around here. Okay, so my previous company was D-Wave. I'll just show you a couple things. We built what are still the world's only quantum computers that you can buy. And the company, D-Wave, has been doing this. Thanks. I didn't really have much to do with it, but you know, so this is one of them. This is one of the processors. And a lot of interesting things happened to me over the years there. I got sent pajamas, a whole bunch of stuff. You know, there's lots of interesting things that happen when you build something like a quantum computer. But just as an aside, because I thought it was funny, one of the interesting things that's happened from the D-Wave story is there's this gigantic conspiracy that's arisen on the internet that goes like this. So D-Wave builds quantum computers. The way that they work, if you know this, how this works, is one of the interpretations is that you tap into these parallel universes and they do computations. Sounds really weird. But what's happened is this idea has been hijacked to describe something called the Mandela effect, which is this thing where the past changes. So think about something you know to be true from the past. And then imagine you went out on the internet and you can't find it at all. It's not there. It doesn't match with your experience. So these people think that D-Wave is responsible, and CERN. And of course, the quantum key to the abyss factors into it somehow. I'm not exactly sure how. Okay, so that's just D-Wave. I did that for about 15 years. It was a lot of fun. A big science project that we turned into a commercial entity. That was a warm-up for Kindred. So Kindred is much, much, much more ambitious than D-Wave. And what Kindred is trying to do is build real AI. So what you've heard about AI is not what we mean by AI. What we mean by AI is a software system that can do literally anything that a human can do. Literally anything. And obviously, computers are better at things than people in lots of different ways. So now imagine, not only can they do everything that a human can do, but they can do everything that the best human at any task could do better than them. So imagine there was the mental Olympics of the 100-meter dash, and Usain Bolt is the fastest person. Now imagine that's some kind of a mental thing, like writing a novel or writing whatever. Imagine now that the thing is so much faster than Usain Bolt. Like, for example, it's a spaceship, yeah? It's still doing the same thing, but it's doing it so much better because we're limited, because we're people. So what Kindred is trying to do is solve this problem. How do you build machines that are better than people at everything? Now, there's a mental block that we have here when we think about this. Because when you think about that, one of your questions might be, for example, what are the applications of this? So imagine this. Imagine, for $10, let's say, I could build a machine, like a little robot, that had fingers and eyes and all that. And it could do your job better than you, no matter what it is. And I could sell that to your employer for, say, $15 and make a profit, instead of having to pay you $100,000 a year. Now imagine that was true for every single job. So that's what we're talking about here, is a complete and utter transformative change that of the likes of which has never been seen before in the history of humanity, making the Industrial Revolution look like a little tiny blip on the path that humans have taken from when we emerged from the ooze a few billion years ago. We are right on the verge of that transition now. So this guy, Rich Sutton, is one of the most famous people in the academic world of AI. And like many, when asked, when will this happen, he says things like this. 25% chance within 13 years of this thing that I'm talking about. You know, when you think about what you read on the news, you know, CNN, BuzzFeed, whatever, they're all kind of the same nowadays. Think about how unimportant that thing is that you're reading if this is true. Yeah? So what does this have to do with aliens? So Sam Harris, who I quite admire, is a very interesting guy, was reciting this parable at a TED Talk that he was giving, and it goes something like this. So, say I'm the President of the United States. So I receive this message from the heavens. So my microwave dish, my SETI dish, finally captures something. And what it says is, in 50 years, or 13 years, we're coming to your planet. You gotta be ready. Now just imagine what would happen if that happened. A super intelligent alien race beamed down a message to all of us Earthlings saying, we're coming July 13th, 2030, and boy, you better be ready because the mothership is landing right on the front lawn of the White House or wherever you wanted to land on that day. The amount of resources that would be marshaled to try to figure out what to do would encompass the whole world. AI is just like that. So when this thing that I'm talking about happens, it's going to be exactly the thing that you're thinking about those super intelligent AIs. So the one thing I can tell you is they're not going to be like us. So alien means, different. These things that we're building are not going to be people. They might be really smart, they might be really good at all sorts of different things, but they're not going to be like us. They're going to be aliens. And they're going to be, I'm sorry to say, way smarter than every single person in this room in ways that we can't even comprehend. So this, of course, triggers a lot of alarm. One of the guys who talks about this is Elon, who says things like this, like, when you do this, beware. Because you think, just like the guy in the stories, that when you do this, you're going to put that little guy in a pentagram, and you're going to have your holy water out, and you're going to wave it at the thing, and by God, it's going to do exactly what you say and not one thing more, but it never works out that way. So this is an attitude that some are having, this emerging alarmism about the way this is going to go. But these words, demons, doesn't capture the essence of what's happening here. I don't know if any of you are turn-of-the-century weird fiction fans, but there's this guy named H.P. Lovecraft, who's a very famous American weird fiction author. And he espoused a view which is called cosmicism. And the essence of cosmicism is cosmic indifference. So what he was saying is basically, yes, there are these massively intelligent entities out there, but they're not good, they're not evil. They just don't give a shit about you even in the slightest. The same way that you don't care about an ant is the same way they're not going to care about you. And these things that we're summoning into the world now are not demons, they're not evil, but they're more like the Lovecraftian great old ones. There are entities that are not necessarily going to be aligned with what we want. So this transition is really, really massively important for our entire species to navigate. And going back to that thing that Sam Harris was saying, nobody is paying attention. This thing is happening in the background while people bicker about politics and what's going to be in the healthcare plan in the US. And underneath it all is this rising tsunami that, if we're not careful, is going to wipe us all out. So, on that pleasant note, we're hiring people to try to make something like this happen. Of course, this is a very difficult project, of course. And I'm kind of a little bit tongue-in-cheek about all this, like, how bad things are, because it's not really like that. Technology is a double-edged sword, even something like this. It's agnostic, it depends who wields it. If you want to have a say in how all this goes down, you can't sit on the sidelines. And one of the ways that you can get involved and really change the world, like, a lot of people say, hey, join the Marines, you'll change the world or whatever. This opportunity that I'm talking about here in Vancouver is an opportunity for you to literally change the world. Because the code that you write may be running in the brains of these things in 10 years. So this is a huge opportunity. I'm going to ask that anybody here who is a software engineer who's really good to talk to any one of these three folks who are sat at the back there, who are Suzanne founded Kindred, and Olivia and Paula are some of our key folks in Vancouver, or talk to me, and we'll have a conversation. By the way, I love Joseph's talk. It's true. Startup life can be very, very difficult, and you will fail many, many, many times before you succeed, just as a matter of course. Thanks.
Thank you, Geordie. First question over here.
Hi, Geordie. My name is Naren, and I do really want to talk to you after this. So, you were talking about summoning the demon by Elon Musk, right? And there are a lot of other pioneers in this industry, such as Andrew Ng, who was a former chief scientist at Baidu. When he was asked the same question about summoning the demon, he said that his analogy was, it's more like thinking about overpopulation Mars. It was completely opposite. But when there are two pioneers in this industry who have different sets of opinions, how do you think that it's summoning the demon rather than the other way around?
Well, obviously people are going to have different opinions. You have to make up your mind yourself. So my general comment is that people always miss the future. It's this old thing that people are always saying things will go faster than they do in the short term and slower in the long term. But it's kind of, for me, it's an obvious thing. I mean, this isn't about, the only question is how long it will take. Again, I encourage you to watch that Sam Harris TED Talk if you're interested in this. But the point that he makes is that as long as certain things that are probably true hold, this will happen. Will progress continue? Maybe it won't. Maybe the Earth will get hit by a meteor and we'll all die. If progress continues, things that we're doing, intelligence isn't magical. It's not some kind of weird thing. It's a mechanical outcome of the way that our machines in our head work. We're going to figure it out eventually. And when we do, we're going to make it better in all sorts of interesting ways. And then you have this weird thing that happens that because the machine is now able to act in its own self-interest, it can take the action to make its own thought process better. We can't do that. So we're stuck with what we were born with, more or less. We can learn things, but that's not the same as getting smarter. So these machines are going to be able to take control of the tools from which they are built to create better versions of themselves. And that, what's sometimes called an intelligence explosion, is something that biological creatures can't undergo. So I think it's an absolutely guaranteed outcome of progress. The only question is when, and I think Andrew would agree with that.
James.
Hey, great to have you out here. It was brilliant hearing you speak for the first time myself. I'm sure a lot of people here would agree with me. What is your goal to stop the world from turning into that of the Terminator?
Right. So there are things about the world that I can't stand, okay? And I think that's probably true for everybody here. You look at the world and there's all these things that you think, shit, what are things like that? So there's a couple of things you can do when you're faced with this. The one that I've found works for me is I'm like, screw that, I'm gonna do that myself, right? So back 25 years ago, I was like, this is bullshit. Why aren't there any quantum computers? It's not that hard a problem. And so we changed the world by actually building them. And in this case, this is bullshit. Why don't we have AI? It's been, what, 60 years since Turing? I mean, it's an absolute catastrophic failure of human resource allocation that we spend enormous amounts of money on things that are of no lasting consequence when the mechanism that generates all human flourishing is not understood. It doesn't make any sense. Every single thing that we will ever do and ever have done comes from this property. So when someday all cancer is cured, when polio was cured, when smallpox was cured, these things all came from people's minds. You can continue to do this stupid thing where everybody works on some particular use of the mind. Okay, well, let's go and do X. Let's go to Mars, like Elon says. That doesn't make any sense to me, because every single thing that you can think of comes from the same place. You got to think about what that is. So if you can figure out and bottle this thing that creates flourishing, that creates all of the good things that we think about, we know about the way that we are, that is the key. Do that. So, that's kind of the way that I think about the world. The world doesn't have the things it needs, and you can't just sit by and watch other people do it. So, it just won't happen otherwise. The way I think about this is if Kindred didn't exist, in 20 years, we're still having this conversation. Because the people who are trying to do AI are going to get sidetracked into making a lot of money, doing all sorts of bullshit that doesn't matter. So what I want to do is make sure that when we do this, we're solving the real problem, and we don't get sidetracked, and we don't go down paths that are going to make us a lot of money just because they're, some short-term thing. We do it because we understand the civilization-changing importance of accomplishing this task. So, that's the way I think about things. Things are bullshit. They're not the way they should be. Change it yourself, or else it won't get changed.
Last question is going to go to Dave if no one raises their hand. No repeat questions. Oh, okay, it's going to, Joseph, make this good. Pressure's on.
I don't get the impression you struggle at night. I think you're pretty clear in what you're set out to do. It's incredible passion. Quick question for you. So, simple mind of mine, I understand AI, what it can do for us 10 years from now. I get excited about it. Just share, the applications everybody can think of. EQ, do you ever envision AI get in a place where we can actually have emotional intelligence, or can actually impact, influence, manipulate, or even help on the emotional level?
Absolutely, no question. By the way, I really liked your talk. It was really good. No, I'm serious. People don't talk about this enough. It's always like roses and fun, but entrepreneurship isn't about roses and fun. It's about getting your soul crushed over and over and over again. And the people who succeed are the ones who keep getting up. It's like that Rocky thing, I'm not going to try to do it, but you know what I mean, that scene. Yeah, so no, my view is that if it's a thing that you can measure, it's a thing you can improve. I think that being good with people, so we were talking with some of our technical people the other day, and one of them said this very funny thing. I'm going to try to remember what he said. He said, language is a way that we use other people as tools to achieve our goals. So it's really deep, right? So we don't usually think about language that way, but when I say something, I'm trying to use you as a tool to get something I want. So in this case, we're hiring software engineers. This is the main thing that I'm trying to get. So I'm trying to use you as tools to satisfy this need of mine. Now, it's a little bit weird to think of things that way, but if you're building an AI and you go and you try to figure out what is language for, language is this thing that is a way to use the people around you to get what you want, which is almost, it's a little sociopathic when you think of it that way, but it's almost a definition of emotional intelligence, is that if you are so tuned in to the responses or how a person will respond to the message that you provide to them, not only your words, but your language and how you act and what you buy and what you wear and all that, that you can always predict that the outcome will be the thing that you want, you're going to be very, very successful. And say politicians are like this. Sometimes you see people and you think these people are just like, man, that guy's got charisma. Like I met Bill Clinton once and he was like, holy shit, I've never seen this before. It's like there's sparks flying off this guy. What was it? He's just got something. And I think that that's a thing that you can measure, and it's a thing you can improve. And I think that it's going to be a part of AI in the future. Not only this kind of idea of like super rational, but also super good at getting what they want. And that's not a bad thing, right? As long as what they want is something good. Like, for example, if the AI is programmed to want to make you happy, say, you might imagine that it will do whatever it can do to achieve that objective, which might mean this sort of thing, giving what you really need when you need it.
What a beautifully thoughtful question to end the night. Dave, you're going to have to bother Geordie. I'm sure. I'm sure it was. Thank you so much, Geordie. Round of applause.
Hey guys, FutureMan19 here, and I have another amazing cryptic article put out by our friends at the Large Hadron Collider at CERN in Switzerland that I will be going over and decoding for you. Every now and then, CERN will release to the public these strangely themed articles that seem to be worded in a very unusual way. Now, the name of their most recent article is titled Hunting Season at the LHC, and I have noticed that most publications that CERN puts out are usually very scientific and straightforward in those respects. But if you're paying close attention, you will be able to catch some of these cleverly made articles that seem to be masking a hidden meaning behind it all. So let's go ahead and read the article. With the LHC now back smashing protons together at an energy of 13 TeV, which stands for 13 trillion tera electron volts, what exotic beasts do physicists hope to find in this unfamiliar corner of the natural world? Okay, let's stop right here. CERN asks us the question, what exotic beasts do physicists hope to find in this unfamiliar corner of the natural world? This is so typical of CERN. They think what they are doing is so funny that they are constantly mocking us. They mock us in their videos that they put out, they mock us in their articles, and more importantly, they are always mocking God. They always seem to write these articles in a very whimsical fancy, like it's a big joke to them. Like when in a cartoon, when the mad scientist starts laughing maniacally when he is about to perform his crazy experiments. So like in the last article that I explained in my Spirit Wars series, where they were naming these unknown particles found in their Large Hadron Collider known as UFOs, which are unidentified falling objects, and ULOs as unidentified lying objects. And then they release these creepy images of their beams from the LHC as if to showcase what they are in fact doing, which is releasing fallen angels or discarnate entities from the abyss. And I'm going to explain what I mean by this. So now in this current article they are stating that they are hunting for exotic beasts in unfamiliar corners from our natural world. I have already gone over how the LHC is without a doubt mankind's greatest achievement. It can be likened to as our modern day Tower of Babel. We built it either out of spite or vanity with the underlying theme that there is no God, so we will figure out how to recreate the universe ourselves, or in other words, create our own heaven, just like what the Tower of Babel people were trying to accomplish by cheating their way up to heaven with a man-made staircase within a tower so tall that they could reach heaven without God's help or judgment. And to further illustrate this point, who was the Tower of Babel's infamous leader? It was a man named Nimrod, and the only description that we have on him was that he was a mighty hunter. Are you guys following me on this yet? So let's start over it again. CERN is located in Geneva, which could be another name for Genesis, which is the first book in the Bible about the creation of the universe, which CERN is trying to do themselves by recreating the factors involved with the Big Bang or the beginning of the creation of the universe. Also found in the book of Genesis is the story of the Tower of Babel, which was about a civilization that got so idolatrous and wicked that they believed that they could reach heaven by building something that could get them there, basically circumventing God's laws. The legend goes on to say that it was a building tall enough to reach heaven, but who knows what it actually was. It could just be symbolic for a structure or technology that man had built to get into heaven. And their leader, Nimrod, was also known as a mighty hunter, which this article is so clearly stating that the people at CERN themselves believe that they are mighty hunters as well. And there is a theory that I have come across recently that explains that the LHC is actually what they call a stargate or a gateway and is connected to the constellation of Orion, which coincidentally is also known as a mighty hunter. This is a whole new theory that I wish to explore in the future in a later video for you guys. So stay tuned about that because it's a rather incredible theory. But anyways, and we also have found out that CERN is actually built upon the old temple grounds of Apollo, which is a part of Saint Poulet, France. And this refers to the verse in Revelation about them having a king over them that was named Apollyon and Abaddon, which translates to the destroyer. And to further illustrate this point, CERN's own mascot that is sitting directly in front of their building, and they are not even shy about it, is named Shiva, which is also known as the Destroyer. And I find it odd that on Google Maps, this location is known as a place of worship. And I will also be showing in my next video on how Orion is also connected to NASA and their Apollo missions, and how the LHC and NASA are actually working together for their greater purpose and hidden agendas. And we all know that CERN is most widely recognized for their discovery of the Higgs boson, aka the God particle, in 2012, the same year as the end of the Mayan calendar date. And like I have said before, this is how they mock God. They say, oh, this little particle was at the very beginning of creation of the universe, so it must be God. And to further mock him, they search even deeper into the abyss of what is known as dark matter, like a magician pulling a rabbit out of his hat, to try and release other particles, or what they are referring to in this article as exotic beasts. People don't really understand, and I know this is hard to imagine, but hear me out for a minute. I believe that when the universe was initially created, there were many particles in play. You can say that there was a God particle that organized all the other particles, but there were some that were not needed anymore, or only initially needed and were possibly causing disruptions in the space-time continuum, or were particles that had the power to ultimately lead to the destruction of the entire universe. These particles might actually be God's way to have kind of like a self-destruct button to destroy the universe if needs be. And I know this sounds far-fetched, but if you actually study quantum physics, you will learn that even how one tiny atom can influence all other atoms around it. This is called supersymmetry, and CERN has achieved it with their quantum computers. So imagine this. The LHC smashes trillions and trillions of atoms together every time they run their machine. What kind of effects do you think this would cause to the fabric of our universe and to the space-time continuum? Have you ever heard of the Mandela effect? I believe that all this particle smashing that the LHC has been doing is the direct cause of it. Every time a particle smashes together and in the process becomes annihilated, it sends a ripple, like in a pond or a lake, through the very fabric of our universe and actually changes our history as we know it. And if you don't believe me, go ahead and study the Mandela effect. There are literally hundreds of thousands of people who have been affected, and no one can explain what is happening to their memories or what they had thought had happened. People are losing their minds because they could have sworn something was this way before, but now it has changed, even in a blink of an eye, and it all has to do with what CERN is doing. In Genesis, the first book of the Bible, it states that, "In the beginning God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, Let there be light, and there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And in the evening and the morning were the first day." So we know that darkness came first, and who are the rulers of the night? The devil and his fallen angels. And this is why the devil believes that he was God's firstborn and should have been chosen to inherit the kingdom and his throne. This is why there was a war in heaven and still continues to this day. This war has lasted for aeons, and the battlefield now rages upon our own little planet. Because darkness feels like he was betrayed by his twin brother, the light, who we know as Christ, and seeks to remove him from the throne of God. This kind of sounds like a Game of Thrones episode, doesn't it? This is why monarchies were one of the very first ways people were governed, and how kings believed that their firstborn sons should inherit the throne. But we see that this way is old and outdated, because it doesn't ever turn out the way we would like it to. You see, this is the very continuance of the war in heaven being played out in our day and age. You can take anything about this world and find a duality about it. The light and the dark, male and female, up and down, nothing and everything. And notice even the word, duality, because it is the clashing of the light and the darkness that are constantly in fight over who is to rule. And on the other side of our world lies what Stranger Things calls the upside down, and what CERN has named the hidden valley, that is filled with antimatter and dark matter. That is their world. This is their universe. It is dark and scary, and nobody is trying to be there. Trust me. So they try and fight to take over ours. This is what they have been doing for centuries and have been doing for millennia. So what is CERN up to? Because you know which side they are rooting for when they are messing with antimatter, releasing dark matter, and opening up black holes, or as the Bible calls it, a bottomless pit or the abyss. It gets even more evident when CERN's actual mascot they worship is named the Destroyer. CERN is not only releasing what we know as particles, they are releasing these fallen angels because they are the particles. Are you following me on this? These particles, what CERN calls exotic beasts, are the actual fallen angels and beasts described in the Bible and also in the book of Enoch. If you have read the book of Enoch, Enoch was God's mightiest angel and was given all the secrets of creation, secrets that no other angel was able to hold on to. But you see, these characters that are found in the Bible, namely Enoch, the devil, and the fallen angels, were ways to characterize these principles of creation, i.e. particles, so that they could be remembered in a story form to be easily passed down from generation to generation. But you see, as time progresses, we only now see them just as stories. But back then, ancient civilizations were actually far more advanced than we even give them credit for, even comparable to us in our modern times. We don't even have the technology to rebuild the pyramids even if we wanted to. And I'm not talking about only in Egypt, but there are pyramids all around the world. These were ancient civilizations that were very advanced in math, astrology, medicine, and even construction. They rival even the technology of our days. They apparently even had a form of a computer back then. It's all very riveting when you actually discover what our world is all about. But we are not taught these things in school because they are labeled as occult, meaning they keep it hidden from you. They want you to be afraid to even look it up because you might be considered a conspiracy theorist or even a heathen. But they know, the elite knows, that if a society forgets its past, then they can keep reusing the same old tricks to repeat history again and again and again. They are doing the same thing right now. How many times has our civilization been laid to waste by our vanity and pride? These are not particles that you want to be messing around with. They obey God, and who are we to be tampering with His creation? Any malfunction, any mistake, could rip a hole in the very fabric of space and time. Don't quote me on that, because you can quote some of the most gifted and brilliant men of our time who said it. Stephen Hawking, Neil deGrasse Tyson, even the Pope declared it. I am only the messenger here. But I didn't want to make this video too long. I just wanted to give you a heads up to what they are doing at CERN. CERN is, without a doubt, our modern day Tower of Babel, where we have built up our own egos with pride and vanity to seek to replace ourselves as the gods of this world and of heaven, just like what Lucifer and his fallen angels sought to do at the very beginning. Because you see, time is not a linear concept. We have it all wrong. Time is cyclical and moves around in a circle. Otherwise, time could not be eternal. The beginning is literally the ending. And we are back to the very beginning of where our civilization first began. The same story of the Tower of Babel playing itself out all over again. It is no secret that our society has gone from bad to worse, from worshipping all manner of idols to becoming an adulterous generation and seeking to replace ourselves on God's throne. I say to you, cast out all manner of false worship and rid yourselves of all sin, for sin weighs you down and burdens your soul. Let Christ, which is the light, lift you up and unburden you, because this cycle is ending very soon. And if you want to make it to the next level of existence, you have to be light as a feather when the angels weigh your soul in the balance of justice.